Sometime in the next 24 hours, your body is going to react to something you do not want. Not a person, not a fantasy, just a stray image, a sound, an accident of attention. And for about a second, you are going to wonder what that says about you. In 2004, in a laboratory in Evanston, Illinois, a graduate student put that exact question on a graph. She got two lines out of the same woman, and they did not agree. One of those lines got filed as the data. The other one got treated as a mistake. It starts with a small piece of clear plastic. Northwestern University, Evanston, Illinois. The psychology department. The graduate student is Meredith Chivers. She is working with a professor named Michael Bailey. This is 2004. The equipment is not new. The question is. The question they are asking sounds simple and is not. When a person says they are turned on and their body says something different, which one is the measurement? So they built a study where both got recorded at the same time. Participants watch a series of short films, some sexual, some not. In one hand, a dial. Turn it up when you feel more aroused. Turn it down when you feel less. And a sensor recording blood flow second by second with nobody's opinion involved. So here is the question, and I want your honest answer because I am coming back to it. You are in that chair. The film is playing. You have the dial in your hand. Your dial says one thing, the sensor says another. There is no trick answer. Pick one. Which one is telling the truth about you? The sensor deserves a proper introduction because it is the authority figure in this story. It is a vaginal photoplethysmograph. It is about the size and shape of a tampon made of clear acrylic. There is a small light inside it. It shines into the tissue and measures how much light bounces back. More blood in the tissue, less light returns. That is the entire principle. Michael Sinchak and James Gear published the design in 1975 in the journal Psychophysiology. It is a blood flow meter. It has never been anything else. It sits in the corner of this entire story, glowing faintly, being believed. Remember that sentence. The field forgot it for 30 years. Now, the films, men and women, straight and gay, alone and with a partner. Exercise footage as a control. Bailey had spent his career on the specificity of male desire. Nobody had run the female version properly. And one more, which is the reason anybody outside this field has ever heard of this study. A nature documentary clip. Two bonobos mating. No humans in the frame at all. Chivers put it in the set, expecting it to function as a second control. It did not function as a control. The films were short. The order was randomized. This is ordinary, careful, unglamorous science. Chivers was not trying to overturn anything. She was running a specificity study. Start with the men, because the men are boring. Straight men responded to films with women in them. Gay men responded to films with men in them. Their dial and their sensor agreed. When one went up, the other went up. Male arousal, in this laboratory, was category-specific and self-aware. The men knew what was happening to them, and they were right. This is what the field expected, because this is what the field had always measured. Almost every assumption about how arousal works had been built on men in chairs. Now the women. Women responded to the films with women, and the films with men, and the films with couples, not equally. The differences were real but small. Straight women, gay women, it made a much smaller difference than anyone expected. What was missing was the sharp sorting the men showed. The genital response was not sorting by category, it was sorting by whether the film was sexual at all. And then the bonobos, two animals in a tree in a documentary, no storyline, no people, nothing anyone in the room had asked for. The men, straight and gay, showed essentially nothing. The line sits at baseline and stays there. The women's line went up. That is the sentence that escaped the journal and got into every magazine in the world. Here is the part that did not escape. The women's dial did not move. They reported no arousal, zero. Their hands were on the dial the entire time and they left it alone. This is the finding, and it is quieter than the headline, and it is the whole point. Two measurements, same woman, same minute, opposite answers. Nothing in the woman's experience registered. The body did something the person did not, and the little acrylic probe, glowing away, recorded its number with total confidence. That gap has a name now. Researchers call it arousal non-concordance. Concordance means agreement. Non-concordance means your body and your mind are not filing the same report. This is not one weird study. Chivers and her colleagues went and checked. In 2010, in Archives of Sexual Behavior, they pooled 132 studies. They calculated how closely genital response tracks what a person says they feel. For men, the correlation was 0.66. For women, 0.26. 0.66 is a strong relationship. 0.26 is barely a relationship at all. If those numbers do not mean anything to you, here is the translation. A man's body is a decent narrator of his own experience. A woman's body is not narrating. It is doing something else, and nobody had asked what. Now sit with what that means about the previous 30 years of research. The photoplethysmograph had been in labs since 1975. Hundreds of studies had used it to measure female sexual response, and the entire time, the assumption underneath all of it was that the number meant desire. Nobody had validated that. It was never tested. It was just convenient. There is a version of this where somebody stops and asks whether the tool measures the thing. That version did not happen for 3 decades. The instrument was easy to use, produced a clean number, and nobody had to take anyone's word for anything, which was, at the time, considered the point. You cannot ask a machine what a woman wants, but you can plug it in and you can publish, and there is a detail in the design of the instrument that makes this worse. It does not measure desire. It does not measure pleasure. It does not measure interest. It measures blood in tissue, vasocongestion. That is the technical word, blood arriving somewhere. That is a plumbing measurement, and blood moves for a lot of reasons. It moves when you are cold. It moves when you are frightened. It moves when you are exercising. Genital blood flow increases in women during sexual films, during anxiety, and during films that are simply intense. The field had built an entire literature on the assumption that in this one context, it meant only one thing. So if the response is not desire, and it fires for almost any sexual cue, and the woman herself does not feel it, then it is doing a job. And the job turns out to matter more than the study. To understand what the response is doing, you have to leave psychology and go to tissue. Vaginal tissue is delicate and it tears. Lubrication and blood flow are what stop that. So ask a design question. When should it switch on? You could build it to switch on when the person wants sex. That is elegant, and it is a terrible design. The cost of a false negative is injury. Or you could build it to switch on at the first sign of any sexual context. Cheap, fast, indiscriminate. It does not consult anybody. Compare it to a blink. You do not consent to blinking. It happens because the alternative is worse. Chivers and others call this the preparation hypothesis. It is not proven. It is the best explanation for a result nobody predicted, which means the number the machine was reading was never a vote. It was a reflex protecting tissue on a hair trigger, and I am going to tell you the rest of this flatly because it is the part that matters and it does not deserve a joke. If genital response is reflexive, then it can happen during sexual contact a person does not want. It does. It is documented. In 2004, Roy Levin and Willie Van Berlo reviewed the literature on this in a forensic medicine journal. Their conclusion was plain. Genital response and even orgasm can occur during assault. It is not consent. It is not desire. It is not evidence of either. And survivors have been disbelieved because somebody in a room did not know that. Some of them stopped reporting because of it. Some of them concluded there was something wrong with them. There is not. There is a reflex with no opinion about what is happening to you. That is the single most important thing in this video, and it took the field until the 2000s to say it clearly. Now here is what the public got instead. The non-concordance finding hit the press and got turned inside out. The headline version was that women are secretly aroused by everything and will not admit it. In 2013, Daniel Bergner published a book called What Do Women Want?, built largely on this research. It sold extremely well. It framed the results as a hidden truth about female desire. Bergner is a careful writer, and the book is not stupid. The framing is the problem. Chivers has spent years pushing back on that reading because it takes the exact same mistake the field made and hands it to the whole culture. Believe the machine. doubt the woman, and now the part where it could have gone differently and did not, because the answer was already sitting in a different building. At the Kinsey Institute in Indiana, John Bancroft and Eric Janssen had been building a model since the late 1990s. Bancroft ran the Kinsey Institute from 1995 to 2004. This was not a fringe project. They called it dual control. Two systems, not one. An accelerator, which responds to sexual cues, and a brake, which responds to everything else: stress, body image, whether the door is locked, whether you trust the person, whether you are being evaluated. They published the questionnaire for it in 2002. The scales are still in use. They are called the Sexual Inhibition and Sexual Excitation Scales. And here is the finding that should have redirected an industry. For most people reporting sexual difficulty, the accelerator is working fine. The brake is what is different. So the pharmaceutical industry spent the next decade building an accelerator, flibanserin, marketed as Adii, called the female Viagra by absolutely everyone except the people who made it. It was never a Viagra analog in any sense. Viagra is a plumbing drug. This one acts on the brain. It has to be taken every day. It interacts with alcohol. The Food and Drug Administration rejected it in 2010, rejected it again in 2013. It was approved in August 2015 after a public campaign framing the rejections as sexism. The campaign was called Even the Score. It was funded in part by the company that stood to sell the drug. In 2016, a research team pooled every flibanserin trial they could get. The result: about half of one additional satisfying sexual event per month compared to placebo, along with significantly more dizziness, sleepiness, nausea, and fatigue. Half an event per month. You cannot press an accelerator hard enough to overcome a brake. That is not a scandal about one pill. It is a diagnosis of how the question was framed. So if the brake is the mechanism, the obvious question is what is standing on it, and the answer is not what you would guess. The brake is not exotic. That is what makes it hard to see. In the dual control research, the things that press it are almost aggressively ordinary. Whether you feel safe, whether you feel rushed, whether you are worried about how you look, whether there is a child awake in the next room, whether you are, at that moment, watching yourself and grading the performance. None of that shows up on a blood flow meter. All of it shows up in whether anything happens. The brake is why context matters more than technique and why nobody sells context. There is no pill for a locked door. There is a second piece, and it comes from a physician in Vancouver named Rosemary Basson. Around 2000, Basson argued that the standard model of sexual response was built backwards for a lot of women. The old model went desire, then arousal, then everything else. Want it first, then respond. Basson's model runs the other way. Arousal comes first, and the wanting shows up afterward. It is called responsive desire, and it is not a disorder. It is a sequence. Roughly speaking, spontaneous desire is more common in men, and responsive desire is more common in women, and both are normal in both. Neither one is the correct one. They are two ways in. If you have ever started something with no particular interest and found the interest arrived 20 minutes in, that is not a lapse. That is the documented pattern. Basson's argument was influential enough to change the manual. In 2013, the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual merged two separate diagnoses into one. Low desire and low arousal stopped being treated as two different problems in women because the field finally accepted they were not arriving in the order it had assumed. So run the whole thing back. A machine gets invented in 1975 to take women's bodies seriously. It produces a number. The number is clean and repeatable and easy to publish. It measures blood. The field spends 30 years reading it as desire. In 2004, Chivers puts the machine and the woman in the same room and asks both. They disagree, and everybody chooses a side. Nobody was acting in bad faith. That is what makes it a good story about science. Every step was reasonable. The instrument was real. The number was real. Only the interpretation was invented, and it was invented by people who were not being measured. We built the machine to stop doubting women. Then we believed the machine instead. Which brings me to the thing that happened to you recently, and that you filed as a personal failing. You have almost certainly done this in the last month. Your body did something and you took it as information about what you wanted. Either direction. It responded when you did not want it to, and you felt something was wrong with you. Or it did not respond when you did want it to, and you felt something was wrong with you. Both of those are the same error, and it is the error the field made for 30 years. You are reading a plumbing signal as a statement of intent. It is not one. It has never been one. It correlates with what you actually feel at about 0.26. There are two lines coming out of you, and only one of them is you. The other one is a reflex that has been protecting tissue since long before you had preferences. The little acrylic probe is still in labs today. It is still a good instrument. It just never knew you. The instrument was never wrong. It was answering a question nobody had asked it. The mistake was never in the machine. It was in which one of you got believed. So, back to the question. You are in the chair. The film is playing. The dial is in your hand. Your dial says one thing. The sensor says another. Which one is telling the truth about you? That question had a wrong answer built into it, and you have been giving it your whole life. The dial was always the one holding the answer. It just never sounded like evidence. It was in your hand the entire time. Nobody asked you to prove it. They asked the machine first, and so did you. You still let the reflex speak for the person.